It's the evening of May 6, 2024, and I'm with John Jekovich. We're in the middle of his chapter 13 of his books, Their Mother's Son, approximately page 358, and the heading is Renee, Tripe Etampes. Okay, and your dog tag number?
42965.
Okay, here we go. On the stove was a large black pot, boiling, fiercely emitting much vapor and aroma. I turned to Renee and blurted out, "Tripe." So remember the smell of tripe when your mother used to make it.
Yeah, well, see, my mother didn't make it till we were older.
She began to set the table with large earthen bowls, along with large soup spoons. The last item she placed on the edge of the bowl were cloth napkins with the initials of J.R. embossed in the gold stitching. She motioned by wringing her hands together. If I wanted to wash my hands, I nodded, and she directed me to the sink with a gigantic pump. Renee pumped the handle several times, and I quickly got my hands underneath the stream of water coming out. She sprinkled some powdered soap into my hands and worked the scant lather into them, then finally rinsed them as Renee continued pumping. I repeated the same procedure for Renee, all the while enjoying being close to her. She would glance at me and her eyes would twinkle. There was no hot water there, huh?
Huh?
In Renee's place, there was no hot water?
No.
Only hand pumps.
Yeah.
Renee bought a large towel from the side of the sink, and we dried our hands together. I kept grasping her fingers in the folds of the towel, and we dried one hand, and she enjoyed my playful antics. I wondered if I was performing some unusual French custom, not aware of its true meaning and significance. I sat down at the table and Renee began to serve the tripe soup along with a bread and glass of red wine.
Was the tripe soup good?
Was the tripe soup good?
The what?
Was the tripe soup good?
Yeah, that's tripe soup there.
And how was the bread?
The bread was good, yeah.
Okay. Okay. The soup was delicious, better than my mother's.
Whoa.
I thought it contained tomatoes, potatoes, onions, some green leafy substance which looked a lot like spinach, but it was not. A whole bunch of vegetables which I could not identify, and of course the tripe cut into little pieces. What's tripe made out of?
Tripe? It's inside of a calf or something. Liver or something.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I asked Renee where she got all the ingredients that went into the soup. She didn't understand the word ingredients. And I spent several minutes trying to make it more understandable. After she understood my question, she answered by saying that the women in the neighborhood would put canned foodstuff up during the summer and fall months, and he occasionally gave her several jars during the season.
Yeah.
So these are all vegetables that were canned like the year before.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And that was
During the summer.
really common practice there, right?
Huh?
Common practice, right? A common practice.
Yeah, yeah.
Renee was pleased I liked the dinner, and I could see the look of her gratification and joy when I asked her for a second serving of the soup. She also had a little more, perhaps several spoonfuls, and sat there watching as I gobbled down my second helping. I was enjoying myself, and I felt comfortable being here with her. There was no pretentiousness on either side. We were just two people who enjoyed each other's company. She poured us another glass of wine, and I could feel its warmth penetrating my bloodstream and raising my blood pressure as I as I gazed at her while she spoke. She would gesture with her lovely hands to reinforce what she was saying. Her sumptuous and sultry lips would mouth her words into a rapture and took all my powers and concentration and focus on her words, rather than much more pleasurable gestures she would emulate. I helped her clean up after dinner, and it was the experience to use well water and hand pumping it entailed to get the chore completed. I enjoyed it greatly, especially when we would switch by me and our bodies would touch momentarily. Our eyes would meet and she would give me a little captivating smile, and then she would just go by me. We went into the parlor and Renee turned on a small radio and stood in the middle of the floor, arms outstretched, gesturing if I would like to dance with her. I tried to get out of it but insisted, and I walked over to her and circled her waist with my arms. I felt awkward at first, but she steadily reassured me, and I improved rapidly. As I held her, I could feel her firm breast on my chest. We stopped in the middle of the room, and the music from the radio continued playing. She murmured something I could not understand and kissed me, putting her arms around me and drawing me closely. As we held each other swaying to the music, I kissed her. I felt myself being very happy. I was elated. I knelt before her and told her to repeat what she had just said. Then she realized that she'd spoken in English rather than in French. We both laughed. Now if I could only speak as well in French. Suddenly I realized the time. In 45 minutes I would be AWOL. I asked Renee the address here, and she responded 5 Rue St. Andres.
How do you spell that?
5 F-I-V-E Rue, R-U, space, S-T period, Andres, A-N-D-R-E, apostrophe, S, Paris, France. We stopped before the entrance of the park, and I took her hand and said I had a wonderful time. She reached over and kissed me. Tomorrow I may see you tomorrow, I murmured. She smiled and said, yes, but no tripe soup. You're doing well with your English, I stated, talking and holding of her hand. She smiled an infectious smile and thrust her manicured finger into my chest. You are teaching me, she stammered, her lips pouting invitingly as she spoke. Got to go, I blurted out. I took her arms and hugged her tightly and kissed her. She put her, as I walked a short distance into the park, I turned and Renee was standing there. I waved as she waved in return. In a few minutes I made the turn in the lake toward the hospital, and she was out of sight. I reached the hospital just before 1700 hours, and a lieutenant on duty stated she was worried that something had happened to me, and it was getting late. I replied that I had lost track of time, and I wandered further than I should have. She cautioned me to be careful, as there were a great deal of black marketing groups on in Paris, both French and American, looking for wristwatches, combat boots, and military clothing. Did you ever run across the people that, in the black market, they were stealing all that stuff?
Yeah.
Because they said they also had a lot of American soldiers into that too.
Oh, yeah.
American soldiers were stealing, and they were selling it on the streets.
I told that Major took that boat, that big boat, shipped it home.
That's amazing, huh?
Yeah.
Could you imagine the cost to ship it? Unbelievable.
I'm seeing some pictures of that, some of the streets along there. Look, John, does that look familiar? Any of these pictures?
But now where is this in France?
That's 5 Rue Saint Andre, Paris, France. Does it look familiar? Any of those buildings?
Yeah. I look at the streets, yeah.
It's the cobblestone that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Very narrow streets.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting, huh?
I thanked her for the word of caution, went up to my ward, and washed up for chow. The ward took on a different hue and complexion after being with Renee the better part of the day. It looked so sterile and impersonal, and on a second glance is almost empty, as most of the beds were turned up. I asked the staff sergeant why the mostly empty beds and most of the beds were turned up. I asked the staff sergeant at the far end of the ward where everyone had gone. He stated quite a few as shipped out this morning, but they're expected another train load late tonight. He suggested I check the bulletin board for any news of my departure, something I had not done for the past few days.
Wow. So you'd have to look at the board to see if you were shipping out. You were looking at the board to see if you were shipping out?
Yeah.
She's coming in. Hello, Claire.
Hi, Claire, come on over. We got a chair for you.
We reserved a chair for you.
There's a chair.
Come on in, Claire. Come on in.
Morning, good afternoon.
Whichever it is.
Oh, now he's out of focus.
How are you doing today, Claire?
I'm doing.
You're looking well.
Scoot up a little, John.
Huh?
Come up a
You're
little
looking
forward.
well.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good, John.
Claire, I'll update you. He's still in Paris, and he's still in the hospital, but he's able to go out on leave, so he's much better. He can walk around Paris, and he's waiting for his orders to go back to combat. That's where we're at right now.
What were his injuries?
His injuries were, he had a bullet that went through his shoulder and went out clear the other side, and then a bomb went off, and the shrapnel went into his leg. They removed some of the fragments, but some of the shrapnel is still in his body today.
Yeah.
And that's why when he goes to the airport, he's got to tell him World War II. He got shrapnel on him. Okay. I asked the staff sergeant and at the end of the ward what was going on. Some of the soldiers were shipping back to combat, but there'll be a set of injured soldiers coming in tonight. I went down to the first floor where the bulletin board was located next to the orderly room. What had posted was the morning shipping orders. Most of those on the list were going to the UK as they were classified in Category 3, the more seriously wounded, or those with complications. There were no more notices posted until tomorrow morning after breakfast. So now you'd have to check the bulletin board every day to see if they're shipping you back to combat.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens. After chow that night, I spent some time in the day room, but still decided against writing any letters. I read a while, but found that I could not concentrate on what I was reading. H.G. Wells' Outline of History. I kept on thinking of Renee, her beauty, and how beautiful she was, and even more, how I missed her. Also, I thought of all the German portraits or paintings throughout Renee's apartment. Was I mother bet a long line of conquest she had conquered, only to be painted and set upon the wall as a trophy? The lieutenant was right. I must be careful. One does not really know what is out there. I sat there for a while thinking how Renee looked and hoping they would not ship me back for another week or so. I got into bed before lights out in a little while. Shoe break. Give him a hand there. Shoe break.
Yeah, I got it.
Shoe break.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I got into bed before the lights out, and a little while later, the medical team came in for our shots. Well, you certainly got a lot of shots in that French hospital.
Yeah.
Every 4 hours. The pretty blonde nurse remarked that this would be my last shot, since of all the treatments, ended 2,400 hours. That meant only one thing. I was going to be returning to my outfit shortly. I was greatly disappointed at hearing the news. I probably would not see Renee again, and it disturbed me immensely. The ward was unusually quiet, and it made it that much more eerie and infallible. I suddenly decided that I did not want to be here anymore. The warmth and safety and environment was too stabilizing. This was not the real life I had to come to know these past months. So now at this point, you weren't comfortable in the hospital anymore. It was too calm. You wanted to get back to action. Is that basically what you're saying?
I was healed. I was healed.
You're healed. You're ready to
Yeah.
go. I felt that it was marking time in some far-off place as an invalid who had to get catered to, helped along the way, generally looked after and checked on a regular basis. The real world was where Renee was, or even still where I had come from. Wiltz, Bastogne, Lape, Fink, Ellis, and Jean. Speaking of Lape, I have a very interesting fact about Lape.
What you got?
I have a very interesting fact about Lape. Donald Lape from New York was killed in the Battle of Bulge when you're with him.
Yeah.
Correct?
Right next to him, yeah.
Very interesting and ironic. I got a copy of this to show you. His brother lived in Daytona for 21 years during the winter, and they just had the obituary in a paper a few years back, and they said the brother stated that my brother Donald Lape predeceased me in the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. But isn't this ironic? His brother, being at Daytona Beach for 21 years, you probably passed him on many occasions.
Yeah.
How could that be? I'm going to show you that obituary. His brother just died at 90. And Lape died at what, 19?
Oh, yeah.
And it mentioned in there that his brother Donald Lape died in the Battle of the Bulge. And I'll show you that in 1 minute. I'll let you read the
Well, they weren't very close then.
Well, how could he be close? The boy was only 19 when he got killed, but he still mentioned him 80.
How old was the other boy?
The brother just died like 4 years ago at the age of 90. So there was nothing for 80 years. Donald Lape was dead. But he still mentioned him in the obituary.
Yeah.
I'll let you read it in 1 second. I'm looking for a copy of the obituary. But in the meantime,
What was it, in the Gazette paper?
it was an Albany, New York paper.
Oh,
But you know, for him living there for 21 years, you passed him. Wouldn't it have been nice if you could have bumped into him and had a chat with him about his brother?
yeah.
That would have been interesting.
They weren't very close then, huh?
Well, how could they be very close? His brother was dead for 80 years. What, you know, Donald Lape has been dead for 80 years.
Yeah.
You know, they must have been close. They mentioned him in the obituary 80 years later. Let me continue reading until I give you the copy of this. I want you to read it yourself and see how close you were to his brother in Daytona Beach. It's just amazing. Yeah, absolutely amazing. The ward was unusually quiet. I tossed and turned all night, causing the night nurse to be at my bedside numerous times. The next morning, I was up earlier than usual. Even then, it was light outside. I got dressed and strolled around the courtyard, and my mind wandering from one thought to another. I did not know what triggered off my sullenness, but I knew I would have to get a grasp on it and resolve it. I ate some breakfast and started to leave the dining hall when the night nurse approached me and said that I was to report to the halls immediately, and I knew what that was for. She had reported my fitful night, and we were going to question me about it. The major ushered me into his little cubicle and started asking me some probing questions. I answered them as truthfully as I could. There were several things on my mind, and I was having some difficulty sorting them out. I replied calmly. He fumbled with a stack of papers on his desk and then asked me these particular questions. Would they have anything to do with you reporting back to active duty in several weeks? I knew right away what he was getting at. Was I sick at the thought of going back up on the line? Sure, I hesitated and had a pit in my stomach of uneasiness, knowing full well the odds were stacked against me the second time around. But that was not the reason. The reason was for my despondency. Suddenly it came to me, and I revealed it partly to the major. I met a girl in town, and I'm having a difficult time breaking it off. I muttered convincingly. The major smiled and said, son, you're young. That's part of growing up. With that, he slapped me on the sore shoulder. I winced at the blow, and he quickly apologized and said, as he recorded his findings on the record, do you want to see what I've written on your chart, he remarked, smilingly. I peered at the chart as he held it up to me. He had scrawled in his typical physician penmanship, patience is in love, fit for duty. I need that obituary, just the obituary.
Oh, it's in the car.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah, it's in the car. I'll go get it.
I thought it was in your purse.
Patience fit for duty, huh?
We'll keep on reading, we'll do it tomorrow then.
Okay.
Patient is fit for duty.
Yeah.
That's what he wrote. I smiled and excused me from the further interrogation. I felt better. The last thing I wanted to do was go through a bunch of psychiatrists to give me a bunch of ink blot tests and asking me all kinds of questions about my childhood and family. That would have been funny. I was correct in my evaluation to the major. I was having a difficult time reconciling my feelings towards Renee. I did not expect another romantic interlude so close to the one I had experienced at Haverford West. I was beginning to see myself in some kind of monster preying on the emotions of innocent women. I did not see myself as a womanizer or even a ladies' man, but only a lonely GI seeking some companionship and socialness. I did not regret any of it, but enjoyed a bit of the time I was fortunate to have with Anne and Jean. Now I was getting involved with Renee. I recalled the major's remarks. I was young, and that was a part of growing up. I felt better and went to the orderly room to get my pass and check the bulletin board. The young lieutenant signed me out and stated I'd better check the bulletin board as there are large shipment going out tomorrow. Wow. So every day you gotta check that bulletin board.
Yeah.
Would you go back to your same group of people?
The what?
When they shipped you out, would you go back to your same group of people you
Oh,
left?
yeah, yeah.
But weren't most of them dead?
Well,
My suspicions were confirmed. I was on the shipping list.
it was?
I was on the shipping list. So that doctor must have told the staff to put him on the shipping list. He's fine. I was being transferred to a convalescent hospital at Etampes, 30 miles away. So you weren't going to combat. They're shipping you to another hospital
Well, I was in Weldon, yeah.
south of Paris.
Where is this, in France?
Yeah.
Paris.
But it's funny, you just had a conversation with the doctor, and he stamped the file saying, patient is ready to go back to combat. And right here, they're shipping you 30 miles south of Paris, Etampes would be my final destination before the depot's replacement center. I was glad for the transfer. The hospital setting was becoming dreary and drab. And I guess I wanted to change. You always want to change. Oh my God. From what I heard of the convalescent hospital, they are akin to an R&R, rest and rehabilitation, furlough along only better. I followed Renee's direction and went up to St. Michel's away, and then picked up a pedestrian complex at Rue St. Andres until I reached the crossroads of Carrefour d'Irbouki at the end of the street, one of the small side streets that radiates out of the Carrefour d'Irbouki had broken street sign on it. It was a particular street that Renee lived on. So how far, when you were sent to this rehabilitation home, were you from Renee now?
Probably 4 or 5 miles.
So you could still see her.
Well, if I could, yeah.
Good night, Claire.
Good night,
Be careful
Claire.
of the cables, Claire.
I will be.
Okay.
What she
Good
said?
night, Claire. Good night, Claire. Okay. So they changed you over to a rehabilitation center, and they're still only 4 or 5 miles. Hello.
Hi.
How you doing tonight? You having a nice night? Are you having a nice night?